Mark Calaway, better known as The Undertaker, is one of the most fascinating wrestlers in WWE history. In this documentary, we shed light on his rise to fame, his legendary career, and also the bitter end.
Injuries are tougher mentally than they are physically. I got hurt so bad, I don't even remember that match. So today, I don't remember it.
He had no idea where he was at.
We give you the unvarnished, emotional story and details that only very few know.
I was so unbearable at home. I lived a pretty excessive lifestyle.
People have no idea how much pain he's in physically.
Would you still want to do a match right now if you're
Absolutely.
Our narrative journey begins in a time when The Undertaker was still Mark Calaway. The most mysterious wrestler had a very normal childhood in Texas.
Spent quite a lot of time on these basketball courts right here. People ask me all the time what led me down this dark path of digging holes and taking souls. There wasn't anything.
Taker likes to look back on this time, but sometimes he gets emotional when he sees old family photos.
My mom was a stay-at-home mom, raised 5 boys, bless her heart. Brother David's the oldest, Mike, Paul, and Tim. Tim, we lost Tim the day before my last WrestleMania match.
The loss of his brother hit Calaway hard. He was never one to dwell on such things, but he has many memories with him. His father's death was also difficult for him. It was his father that taught him central skills and attitudes that made him into the man he is today.
My dad, hard worker, I think he instilled that work ethic in me from the early age. It was always about respect and hard work and your name and your word. And those things were instilled in me at a really early age.
One evening, the Calaway family went to a wrestling event. As a teenager, Mark was a pretty decent basketball player, but when he saw the ring, the ropes, and the wrestlers, it awakened something in him. A fascination that is difficult to explain and describe. But every wrestling fan knows it. Every fan has it. Mark Calaway was a wrestling fan. He loved watching the matches. There was only one thing in the world he loved more: being in these matches himself. His parents were not at all fond of the idea of their youngest son getting into the ring.
You remember taking me and Wayne to Sam Houston Coliseum to watch wrestling?
Big mistake.
Well, it was a somewhat honest living, I guess.
When The Undertaker faced Sid at the beginning of his career, his mother was in the audience. She still regrets it to this day.
Yeah, it goes something like, "What are you gonna do, old lady? What are you gonna do? Am I beating your baby boy up?"
Undertaker's mother was furious at Sid's disrespect.
My brother and my dad are grabbing onto her and holding her back. And I kid you not, she had bruises the next day on the inside of her arms from where they were having to hold her back.
Before his time at WWE, The Undertaker wrestled as Mean Mark Callis in WCW, sometimes with Paul Heyman as his manager. The performances did not yet fascinate the fans. There was no mysterious aura to be felt. Taker lacked what made him a big star: his extraordinary gimmick. The WCW bosses were also dissatisfied with him, especially Ole Anderson. But Ole made a mistake. He said something disrespectful that etched itself into Taker's mind.
He goes, "Mark, you're a great athlete, but no one's ever gonna pay money to watch you wrestle."
This statement became a chip on his shoulder. The Undertaker said in interviews it was this discouragement that actually motivated him his entire career. He had to prove the doubters wrong. But above all, this sentence scared him. Taker was afraid that it was true, that no one would pay money to see him wrestle. He had that fear of failure, of not making it. It scared him so much because he loved wrestling deeply. He liked nothing better than to get into the ring in front of a heated crowd, The thought of failure kept him up at night. In fact, Vince McMahon, the CEO of WWE, wasn't blown away with mean Mark Callis at first. Vince saw his match against Lex Luger in 1990. Taker was struggling with a dislocated hip and was in a lot of pain. Well, Vince didn't know that. The wrestling mogul saw a generic big man, a red-headed giant without much potential. His saving grace was the approval of Paul Heyman. He stood up for Calloway, and so a life-changing meeting took place.
I meet with Vince. It seems like it's going really well. What was supposed to be a 30-minute meeting ended up being 4 hours.
The incredibly nervous Mark Calloway sat opposite Vince McMahon for hours. Immediately, the two developed a special connection, and Calloway's biggest dream came true. Vince offered him a contract.
Vince really fell in love with the human being, Mark Calloway. How could that man walk into a room and someone like Vince McMahon with all of his big visions not go, oh, ching?
They came up with a work of creative genius, a gimmick with history written all over, a wrestling character with unparalleled charisma, the Undertaker.
It's just one of those characters that people were really drawn to because it was just so different. Nothing happy about it. This dude was an ominous figure. He was a killer. It landed right perfectly in my wheelhouse of what I wanted to do.
A menacing giant with piercing dead eyes, Calloway was to embody this character. He was full of anticipation, but also tense and plagued by fear of failure. The debut at Survivor Series 1990 was impressive. The theatrics caused wide eyes among the fans. Imposing and powerful, Calloway dominated his opponents.
That character had to move slow. That was the hardest thing to do, is to walk that slow and be that ominous character when on the inside, man, I am just bouncing off my internal walls. What do you like most about The Undertaker, the character?
I didn't like him at all.
You didn't like him at all?
Take a look at the Undertaker. Does he look like he has any threat?
There were some times on a TV day where I'd get there early and go and find a casket and lay down and take a nap in.
Every appearance was a new occasion to shudder, and Calloway managed to bring The Undertaker's gimmick to life and refine it further and further. For example, through the iconic white eyes.
The eye roll just happened. I was wrestling Greg the Hammer Valentine, and I slapped a choke on him, and I don't know what made me do it, but I rolled my eyes back into my head. When I went backstage, everybody was freaking out, like, whoa, what was that? That was the coolest thing I'd ever seen.
Initially, he bore the name Kane the Undertaker. However, the officials quickly changed that and passed the idea onto his storyline brother, Kane. This formed a legendary story, a rivalry, but also a time together as a team, the Brothers of Destruction.
I get it all the time to this day. Are you and Kane really brothers? I look at him as brothers, so brothers in spirit.
When asked about The Undertaker, Kane responds in interviews with deep respect, reverence almost.
I owe him a lot, both professionally and personally.
In 1997, Kane faced The Undertaker in the first Hell in a Cell match against Shawn Michaels. A great match was followed by a moment that many still look back on to this day. Less than a year later, there was another memorable Hell in a Cell match for The Undertaker. This time against Mick Foley, aka Mankind. Foley wanted to top last year's match, take it one step further, and in a way he succeeded. However, not for wrestling quality. Foley had more brutality in mind and made daring suggestions. The Undertaker was not at all amused.
Every day he would just shoot it down. And then finally he said, "Jack, why are you so intent on killing yourself?"
The match goes down in history as the most brutal Hell in a Cell match ever, especially because of Foley's nasty falls.
Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought either one of these guys would come flying off of that Hell in a Cell. You look up there and it's no, that couldn't happen. It'd be impossible. Somebody'd be dead. If you don't do it the right way, he over rotates. He doesn't make it. You have to deal with that. To be completely honest, I'm just hoping that he hits the table. And as morbid and weird as that sounds, there's a big difference between hitting the table and hitting the concrete.
Shortly thereafter, Foley took another fall from the top of the cage, this time into the ring.
I realize I don't have as many teeth as I used to.
I was just looking down, waiting on him to move.
It knocked me out legitimately.
According to Bruce Pritchard, this was not planned. The actions were so crazy that backstage crew, referees, and friends of Foley stormed the ring. They thought Foley was in a life-threatening situation.
In any given match on any given night, you're really only a couple of inches away from something catastrophic happening at one point or another.
The Undertaker was also injured during the match. He had suffered an ankle injury, but now had to get from the roof of the cage into the ring. Painful, but he managed it. After further brutal actions, The Undertaker won this encounter. Foley can no longer remember the match due to concussions. In a few years, The Undertaker became a money-making machine for WWE. He was one of the biggest stars, an attention magnet who filled arenas. The fans loved to see him, and the statistics reflect that. WWE reached its highest TV ratings with a match at Raw 1999 between The Undertaker and Steve Austin. These two megastars made sure that more viewers switched to the USA Network that night than ever before. What set Steve Austin and The Undertaker apart was that Taker was at the top as a main event attraction for much longer. Edge expressed his deepest respect for The Undertaker on the Impulsive podcast. According to Edge, the hardest thing is not to get to the top, but to stay there. The Undertaker retained his relevance over decades, primarily by evolving and adapting his character. In retrospect, he calls this his greatest strength.
Probably that's my best attribute. If I started feeling stale, my audience is probably feeling it before me.
The changing over time, the ability to adapt. He was able to take that character and morphed it.
But I don't think I would have made it through. If I hadn't have changed when I did to go to the American Badass, I would have made it. The character I don't think would have lasted through the Attitude Era.
The Undertaker was very good at recognizing what the fans wanted and what they connected with. This also helped him to recognize when changes were needed. The character change to the American Badass was a risky but very successful decision to protect his character.
I mean, the roots of the character were always the same, but it was just the presentation. And that was just my way of evolving and trying to evolve with the audience.
American Badass!
However, Vince McMahon suggested he return to the Deadman gimmick. Tried and tested, it had already garnered a legendary status, mostly because The Undertaker took it very seriously and went to great lengths to protect his character.
I didn't do personal appearances. You got very little of me other than what you saw on TV. And that's what kept people captivated.
Vince even forbade The Undertaker from going to strip clubs. This would jeopardize his image as a popular fan favorite.
I would be an all black. I didn't say much. I always felt like that I needed to be what they saw on TV, because if they saw me differently, then they see that on TV. It's like, oh, fuck. It's just acting. It's just this, it's that. So I tried to make that guy real.
The Undertaker was not seen in public with his storyline opponents. If this did happen anyway, he would stare at them in disdain. He was constantly in character.
Mark Calloway didn't exist. Mark would show up places as The Undertaker, and he would limit his exposure. And every move was calculated. The man didn't speak for years. You want to talk about somebody who's bald? If you went to a nightclub or saw him in an airport, it wasn't the costume, but there was no denying that was The Undertaker. Long hair, black sunglasses, all black clothing, like his demeanor was The Undertaker.
Mark Calloway spent half his life in the role of The Undertaker, which made it extremely difficult for him to break away from it later. Being this wrestler became his identity.
When I started with the Undertaker character, it basically took over almost every aspect of my life.
The Undertaker is old school. His trainers taught him that his credibility would suffer if he broke kayfabe, but the fact that he protected his character so much shows one thing above all: his love for the business, his love for the sport.
They knew that I was a live human being, but they genuinely believed, I think, that I thought I was the Undertaker. I think that's the way that I was perceived. Like, this dude is just different, and different from what everybody else was doing.
His colleagues were impressed by this and respected his serious approach. However, his friends tried to make him laugh. For example, one of his closest confidants, Kurt Angle. The goal was to put Undertaker in a situation where he would break character and laugh, or even just break a smile in front of the cameras. Kurt Angle tried it with a kiss.
I love you, man.
That's a long flight back to the States.
Another big star tried to get a smile out of him. The reason The Rock invented the people's elbow was originally to make The Undertaker laugh. The rather unbelievable move was a provocation against the man who stood for credibility in the ring like no other. Mark hated the move, but didn't let on to it. Later, even Vince McMahon tried to provoke him. In August 2012, The Undertaker was backstage, about to retreat to his bus and relax, but Vince had him called back to the arena. There was still something to rehearse for the upcoming show. When The Undertaker arrived at the arena, he found his boss giggling. As he turned around, he saw that Vince was playing a video on the Titantron, a scene of Mark struggling to get out of his coat.
So when I go to drop the coat, instead of the coat falling straight, the coat bends. Right?
It's live TV.
Look, not more of my proudest moments.
Over the course of his career, he developed into a real locker room leader.
He's the leader of the locker room. And a lot of that is based on respect.
The whole locker room leader thing is nothing that I ever sought to be. It's just the way that I thought that things needed to be done for the sake of the business.
Every one of us looked at that locker room and said, that's the dude, that's the benchmark right there. I'm looking through the curtain, I'm watching Taker work, go out there and tear the house down. I went, I got no problem with him getting paid more than me. He's earning it.
Leading others is in line with Calloway's personality. He learned early from his father what it means to take responsibility, including leadership responsibility.
I don't think I've ever been around a wrestler that has carried and earned more respect in the locker room of his peers than Mark Calloway.
The Undertaker became the most respected person backstage for various reasons, including his presence and charisma.
It's not just his persona, it's his presence. Well, you might make it in this business, dude.
Undertaker was even more respected as a leader than the boss of WWE, Vince McMahon, because The Undertaker was very clear about his opinions, even with his boss. For example, after Vince screwed Bret Hart out of his title in Montreal, The Undertaker had an understanding for both sides, but was angry they went behind Bret's back. He demanded that Vince personally apologize to Bret Hart in his dressing room, an order that put Vince in a difficult position. In an enormously tense situation, Vince entered the dressing room and approached Bret. Bret punched him in the face. The following year at WrestleMania 14, the air was thick backstage. Shawn Michaels, then WWE champion, was supposed to lose his title to Stone Cold and retire due to his back problems. HBK didn't want to retire and made a scene. The dead man sensed trouble. Michaels was known for his unprofessional behavior. He got ready for a brawl with the headstrong champion, but it didn't come to that. In fact, Shawn Michaels stuck to the plan. This was not a given. Time and again, The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels clashed. Despite these differences back then, they are friends today and look back on their legendary battles against each other.
Even when I didn't care for him as a human being, there was not many people that I had rather work with.
When asked about his favorite match in interviews, Mark Calloway's answer is completely clear.
It had to be WrestleMania 25 with Shawn.
I mean, that was as close to perfect that I'd ever been involved in.
Conflicts are normal in wrestling, but it's just as normal for them to be buried again. The Undertaker buried them literally.
It's like a convention of old timers.
His beef with Big Show also didn't last long. When Big Show came to WWE, he made some rookie mistakes in the ring. Taker was angry and criticized Big Show harshly after the match. Meanwhile, many years later, the two get along very well.
Taker wasn't afraid to tell you how to do it and then go out there and prove you how to do it. A lot of guys talk a lot of about how to do stuff and how to be good. Taker backed it up every night.
Behind the curtain, no one spoke more words of power than The Undertaker. This gave rise to the so-called Wrestler's Court. The Undertaker was the judge, and therefore also the one who handed out the punishments. Most of the time, the defendants had to buy him alcohol, or give colleagues gifts. However, there were also unpleasant judgments. Melina, for example, was harshly sentenced for her arrogance. What exactly the punishment was is unknown, but she is said to have burst into tears. The Undertaker kept the chaotic backstage roster in check, was a mentor and leader, advocate and judge at the same time. Brock Lesnar knows all about it. Taker supported him as a big, fresh talent. The two had a mentor-student relationship. However, when Lesnar then left WWE and stabbed Vince McMahon in the back, Undertaker was angry. A fierce conflict started between the two, one that lasted for years and even flashed briefly in public. At a UFC fight, Mark Calloway was in the audience when the following happened.
It's almost like you're at a loss for words here.
You want to do it?
There was Brock Lesnar right there. What did you just say to him?
It's kind of a personal thing. I think maybe he needs to, I think he needs to train a little harder.
Are you guys cool?
Personal.
After the incident, The Undertaker apologized to UFC boss Dana White. He did not want to divert attention from the UFC and put himself and Lesnar in the spotlight. White accepted the apology. It was difficult for The Undertaker to understand why Lesnar left. After all the chances he had been given, Calloway himself never left WWE. Throughout his career, he remained loyal to Vince and his company, although he did consider walking away at one point, but for other reasons.
It was more frustration with what we were currently doing, and just feeling like we were stale and behind the time. We were so kid-driven. You know, that our demographic was what, 9 to 12-year-olds.
Despite these thoughts, Undertaker remained true to the WWE. This was especially important in the late 2000s. Backstage, there was an increasingly competitive, hostile atmosphere. There were many conflicts, and The Undertaker was slowly handing over backstage leadership responsibility to John Cena. CM Punk emerged as a difficult character during this era. His blunt and sometimes disrespectful demeanor wasn't well received. Punk also didn't take direction well. Rumors say The Undertaker reprimanded him in 2009, advising him to improve his attire to better represent WWE as the world champion. However, CM Punk had no interest in following dress codes or the veteran opinion. It is speculated that he lost his title to The Undertaker as a consequence. Punk quickly learned that The Undertaker was a respected leader whose advice was worth heeding. Even the veteran Chris Jericho sought advice from The Undertaker. For WrestleMania 29, Jericho wanted a major match with a captivating storyline at the grandest stage of them all. Instead, boss Vince McMahon booked him in a match against Fandango, which, to add insult to injury, he was expected to lose. Frustrated, Jericho turned to the dead man for guidance on how to persuade Vince to change his mind. Taker imparted a valuable lesson, advising Jericho to simply follow the plan and perform professionally as instructed. Jericho followed his lead and was indeed rewarded for his compliance. The pay for the match was reportedly excellent. The Undertaker relished his role as a respected mentor and leader. He loved his life, stepping into the ring with his friends. For him, his colleagues were far more than just co-workers.
I've been very blessed to have
two families, my wife and my children, and then my family on the road.
When The Undertaker speaks of two families in interviews, it unfortunately also suggests that he neglected one of them.
You've got to be on the road, and you've got to be gone.
To this day, Calloway deeply regrets not spending more time with his children.
I missed out on so much of those early years with them because I was pursuing this dream. It was the hardest, I think, with my oldest son, Gunnar. I think he got the worst end of the deal.
He still reproaches himself for not striking a balance between his two families.
I love my children, and hopefully they understand how much I do love them, but I missed out.
The Undertaker cherished time with his kids, but he loved wrestling even more. He loved the life of The Undertaker more than the life of Mark Calloway.
There wasn't anything in the wrestling world that I didn't have the answer for. My personal life was a little bit different. I had more holes in that than a piece of Swiss cheese.
The Undertaker has 5 children from 3 marriages and has been divorced twice. His first marriage to Jody Lynn lasted 10 years. His marriage to Sarah Frank, 7. Calloway then met his current wife, Michelle McCool. Michelle, a fellow wrestler, initially made a conscious effort to avoid The Undertaker and Kane backstage, intimidated by their imposing personas. However, this distance didn't last long. She soon discovered their kind and considerate nature, and Mark fell in love.
I always told guys, you don't date people that you work with. This is not going to work. I said it for years, and then I broke my own motto.
Michelle shared his passion for wrestling, a love that ran deeper than mere ambition. It was a true calling for her, not a stepping stone to Hollywood. Taker was deeply impressed by her dedication.
Somehow or another, I met I even actually get a little choked up. Wow. She's awesome.
I'm basically learning how to be a dad and be present all the time.
Now you're styling.
It's been a process for me to learn to switch the priorities around.
Michelle has been by The Undertaker's side since the pinnacle of his career. She has also witnessed, closer than anyone else, the gradual decline of the most captivating wrestler in WWE history.
She's been phenomenal in the sense that she understands what being The Undertaker means to me. She realized that I was getting older and my body's breaking down.
For the last few years, I've had this internal struggle of I don't want to stay too long.
Decades in the wrestling industry don't just pass one by. Behind the muscular physiques that shine under the spotlight lie stories of pain and suffering. In every match, the body becomes a plaything of gravity. Even though wrestlers know how to fall professionally and safely, the so-called bumps leave their mark. Chronic pain is not uncommon for wrestling stars, often leading to substance abuse. In a podcast with Steve Austin, The Undertaker spoke about his many excesses, revealing his use of various drugs and his reputation as a party animal.
I lived a pretty excessive lifestyle.
In an interview with Joe Rogan, The Undertaker admitted to his substance abuse. In addition to steroids, he also took illegal painkillers. Given The Undertaker's injury history, this comes as little surprise.
17 surgeries to repair wrestling-related injuries. I've had both my eye sockets crushed. I've torn a pec, I've torn biceps.
It's a tough way to make a living.
In 2010, The Undertaker's life was at risk in a horrific accident. Elimination Chamber, 2010. The pyrotechnics ignited prematurely during his entrance, engulfing him in flames. Severe burns were the price for this colossal blunder. Only his coat and wide-brimmed hat saved him from worse. Chris Jericho later revealed that the pyrotechnician responsible was fired after the match. But how did The Undertaker react? He ignored the pain and fought through the match, just as planned. A testament to his professionalism and willpower.
He's literally been called on fire on the way to a chamber match, stood in the pod pouring water on himself for 20 minutes before he went out and wrestled for 30 more minutes with second-degree burn. Like, he literally does not make excuses.
Time and again, The Undertaker stepped into the ring with injuries, bearing severe wounds and excruciating pain, but he never backed down. This was also part of the old school mentality. Whether you were in pain or not was a matter of comfort, irrelevant to the fact that the show must go on. Injured or not, The Undertaker lived by that principle, and it took a heavy toll on him.
That's where I got carted out. I actually had to spend 2 full days in the hotel after Mania. Got the hip repaired. The next year was pretty good.
But there comes a time with any performer where they can't do this on an everyday basis anymore.
All good things come to an end, including The Undertaker's undefeated streak at WrestleMania. The Undertaker was frustrated by the decision. For years, he had the romantic notion of retiring undefeated. At the same time, he wanted to give back to the business and build up another star, but not in the way it happened at WrestleMania 30.
This is, I don't think Brock needed it, and he was made. I don't know that it enhanced him anymore.
That's kind of what it came down to. It is what it is.
When The Undertaker arrived in New Orleans for WrestleMania 30, he thought he would beat Lesnar, but Vince McMahon decided to change the match finish at the last minute.
When I got there that day, I was still going over. Early afternoon, and I remember sitting in the dressing room, and Vince came in, and I knew as soon as he came in, I knew what it was. He's changed the finish.
The Undertaker argued with Vince Lesnar wasn't the right guy. He didn't need the win, but Vince asked, if not Lesnar, then who? In Vince's eyes, no one else on the roster was more believable.
There was no one on the roster, potentially. In the following year, or year after that, it was timing.
Later, in an interview, The Undertaker said that Vince definitely wanted to end the streak. But the decision wasn't deeply considered. It was spontaneous. The Undertaker agreed under protest. No one knew about it, not even Vince's closest confidants.
It went back and forth a couple times, so much to where I still thought The Undertaker was going over, and Mark looks at me and he goes, Michael, they changed the finish. And I was just stunned.
Even the referee was kept in the dark and was instructed to count every pinfall normally. WWE's graphics department prepared designs for both outcomes, one with 22 and 0 and one with 21 and 1. There was a mistake in the production of the show that allowed fans a brief glimpse of the 22 and 0 screen. Word spread quickly that The Undertaker would win again. No one expected the streak to end. The shock on their faces was all the greater because of it.
Whoever would beat that streak would become a massive heel. What Vince didn't see was that he would become the heel.
The match was different from previous streak matches and did not go as planned.
I got hurt so bad. I don't even remember that match. Till today, I don't remember it. And when I finally did watch it back for the first time, I watched it like I'd never seen it before.
Here, you can see the moment The Undertaker suffered a severe concussion.
Only working that one time a year, I think it finally caught up with me.
He barely finished the match, but was physically and mentally at his limit.
Most guys aren't Brock Lesnar and aren't able to throw me around like that. It was nothing that Brock did. I just don't think my body was used to the trauma.
Behind the curtain, he collapsed and lost consciousness.
Vince comes to the curtain and says, "Medical, get in here, somebody." And this was the first time we had any inclination that there was something wrong. And he was sitting in the walkway outside of Gorilla, and he had the happy dazed look on his face that he had no idea where he was at. And he looked at me and he kind of smiled and he's like, "Hey." And I'm like, oh boy, something went wrong here.
I mean, I was gone, man.
He was deeply dissatisfied with his performance. He was unaccustomed to the feeling that his body couldn't handle the rigors of wrestling anymore, and it bothered him.
It's one concussion in one match destroyed my confidence.
After his defeat, photos surfaced on the internet, photos that made him look very old. He realized he couldn't wrestle anywhere close to 100% anymore. His days as an active wrestler were numbered.
once I got over the concussion and all that, then it was just like, what's happened to you? You have a reputation as a tough son of a gun. You know what's happened? You know, is this it?
During this time, his mental state was in turmoil. The end of his career looming just ahead got to him.
So I had all this self-doubt. After all these years of success and doing everything, it was just like, I'm not sure that I can do this again.
Yet he still wanted to step back into the ring for WrestleMania 31. He wanted to prove he still had it. The Undertaker knew some fans didn't want to see him anymore, but that only motivated him more.
There's a huge amount of our fan base. They understand that you've got a lot of miles on you, but they just want you out there.
Right.
And then there's that one part of the fan base like, man, he's old. He shouldn't be out there. He shouldn't be doing this.
A warm evening on the California coast, WrestleMania 31. His opponent, the late Bray Wyatt, a longtime Undertaker fan and admirer.
When he walks in, he has this presence, and everyone knows that he's there. Even if you don't see him, somehow you just know. And you just sit silently, like waiting for what he's going to say. A lot of us younger guys, we get excited, but he has this ultimate calmness about himself.
Before the dead man entered the arena, he was extremely nervous. Triple H noticed and encouraged him, reminding him of who he was. The Undertaker went out and won the match. It wasn't a match that left wrestling critics speechless, but it was a good match with solid storytelling that went according to plan. In the storyline, it was clear that The Undertaker had to seek revenge on Brock Lesnar. This led to 2 highly praised matches against Lesnar at SummerSlam and Hell in a Cell. The old Undertaker was back, delivering great performances and proving that even after 25 years, fans would still pay money to see him wrestle. At WrestleMania 32, Undertaker was arguably the most important star on the match card. His bout with Shane McMahon in a cage is especially memorable for the massive fall off the cell roof. After the match, The Undertaker limped for several weeks. He had hip problems before, but now they were worse than ever. For a year, he struggled physically and was in no condition to wrestle at WrestleMania 33. Still, he decided to go ahead, a decision he deeply regretted.
I wasn't going to be ready for Mania, but I'd already committed to the program.
I knew I wasn't anywhere close to being at 100%. I was trying to figure out how to make it work.
When The Undertaker arrived in Orlando for WrestleMania weekend, WWE officials were worried. His physical condition was worse than ever. Calloway was limping through the hotel lobby.
I knew I was in bad shape. We got there that day, and I was like, man, my right hip.
Later, he said he was extremely uncertain before the match against Roman Reigns. He could hardly sleep the night before. As the sun rose on WrestleMania Sunday, The Undertaker had already been awake for hours.
This morning always seems to start excessively early. I don't need to be awake yet, but I'm already laying there staring at the ceiling, running things through my mind. Okay, gotta get your confidence flowing.
It's normal for The Undertaker to be full of tension on WrestleMania Day. However, on this day, he was more nervous than ever before.
Don't embarrass yourself. Don't embarrass the company.
In the morning, he rehearsed his entrance, and at noon, he could hardly eat due to excitement. His physical difficulties made preparation challenging. He had to consider things that had never been an issue before.
I'm having to figure out, okay, how am I going to sell this? And how am I going to get up and do this, and how am I going to do that? When all that starts feeding in, it breaks down the whole process.
For the main event of the big show, officials planned a grand passing of the torch from The Undertaker to Roman Reigns. Taker was afraid that the last match of the night would also turn into the biggest disappointment.
I guess probably what I worry most about, making sure that the people are getting what they pay to see.
Then came the moment.
It is hard to even describe all the emotions that you go through, all the jitters, the concerns. Am I ready? I mean, it's just, it's big time.
What followed was what Calloway had feared. His body was not up to the match. Many things went wrong. He limped and had trouble staying on his feet. What some interpreted as selling were real injuries and pain.
See the lines on my face, times when the world giving.
Fans criticized the match online, but given the physical condition Taker was in that night, he delivered.
But I still got fire burning deep in my soul.
He gave everything he had, but even he realized that what he had was not enough for a WrestleMania main event.
Roads been long, nights spent on stage.
He felt it was time to hang up his boots.
Now the whispers echo. It's time to let go. But how can I feel? I still got so much to say.
Triple H was the first to greet him behind the curtain. Taker was overwhelmed with disappointment and farewell pain, fighting back tears.
I didn't know that I was going to come back again. The hat and the coat, all that being placed in the ring was 100% legitimate. At the end of it, I was done. And that was my way of saying goodbye. Yeah, it wasn't a planned or staged thing.
After WrestleMania, The Undertaker underwent hip surgery. When the doctor asked if he had been operated on before, he broke out in a tired laugh.
No surgeries in your past? Appendix, tonsils? Have you had surgery?
Yeah, I've had a few.
The surgery went very well, and over time he got back in shape, but with much more ease than before, with movements that previously contorted his face in pain.
Nobody else feels sorry for me. I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I shouldn't have been in the ring last year. Simple as that. It won't happen again. You can bet that.
8 months after the WrestleMania match, Calloway watched it back with his wife for the first time. It was visibly hard for him to watch.
You know how disappointed I was in my performance, and that I put myself in that situation because I just couldn't physically get to where I needed to be for Roman, and how important that was. And I just, as hard as I tried, I mean, I trained like an animal, but I mean, my hip it held me back.
I feel bad for Roman. I haven't spoke to him about it. He's probably looking at me right now thinking, what was that guy all about? It's really disappointing.
The Undertaker's pride was hurt. This match could not be his last. He knew he could do better, and his body was now capable of it.
You know, I never wanted anybody to have to cover for me because I was too gimped up or I was too beat up and I couldn't move around.
Vince and Taker agreed on a match for WrestleMania 34.
I get my hip fixed. I get a call. They want me to work with Cena. Oh, crap.
John Cena versus The Undertaker. A big money draw.
So Vince called me, said, what do you think? And I was like, I don't know. I start training, and lo and behold, I could move again.
In a follow-up call, Calloway ordered a ring for his place in Texas. He rented a warehouse and trained intensely. But he didn't have to do it alone. Vince sent Primo as a training partner. At that time, Primo wasn't being used by WWE, but he was known as a skilled in-ring technician. He helped The Undertaker shape up ahead of his retirement.
I can't remember the last time I had to move that fast. Nope, it looked good. Yeah.
To stay motivated, Calloway hung posters and banners all over the training hall. In the WWE Last Ride documentary, he said that whenever he felt he couldn't go on, he drew strength and motivation from those banners.
The hardest I've been able to train in probably 10 years. And I was ready, man. My cardio, I trained for like a 45-minute war, right?
The training paid off. Undertaker watched his diet, lost weight, and trained constantly, which made him pretty irritable.
I trained I was so unbearable at home.
The conflicts with his wife were just one of the symptoms of Calloway's intense focus. Soon, he could barely think about anything other than the big match against John Cena. They had never faced off at a major event before. For The Undertaker, this matchup was an honor, and he was looking forward to it. A year after the debacle at WrestleMania 33, The Undertaker arrived in New Orleans. This time, his arrival was kept secret.
I am gonna light this place on fire. I felt good.
He was eager to discuss his match with John Cena. The Taker was ready for a big, long match. But Vince McMahon had some bad news.
Vince calls me into his office and he goes, okay, he said, it's gonna be about 5 minutes. You're gonna squash him. I'm like, what? And I didn't know it was gonna be short till I got there that day. I said, I'm going. I said, I'm doing 30 or I'm not going out. And he's like, Mark, that's not what we need.
Even Cena thought a dominant squash victory was the best choice from a storytelling perspective.
And I'm like, no, Vince. I was like, where's John? So John comes in. He goes, I talk mad smack about you, dude. Yeah, you need to beat me quick and get this over with. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Calloway was disappointed. He had undergone surgeries and trained hard to deliver a classic match in the ring. On the day of the show, he found out he wouldn't be wrestling for 30 minutes, but only 3. In an interview with Chris Van Fleet, he said Vince McMahon had gotten a kick out of it. He found it amusing how stunned The Undertaker was, but the short match time had other reasons. The officials wanted to protect The Undertaker. They wanted to avoid him having another long match where his body might let him down. History showed that even a small injury could ruin the rest of a big match. But Calloway was in much better shape than they thought.
It's one thing to come back, but to come back and look like this. Oh.
The Undertaker achieved what he wanted that night. A strong performance, even if it was brief. He didn't look old, he looked fresh and strong.
My body did everything that I asked it to do. And I didn't have to ask it, I just did it. I didn't have to think about how I was going to hit the ropes, or how I was going to get my foot up, or how I was going to punch, or how I was going to do anything. I just did it.
Undertaker is back, better than ever.
After the match with Cena, Calloway was still a bit disappointed but relieved about his good performance. Backstage, he ran into Roman Reigns and apologized for the weak performance the year before.
Well, I didn't have it. You know that.
That night, the Taker said something to his wife that she wasn't too thrilled to hear. As seen in later backstage footage, he told her he felt up for more matches. "20 days later, the Phenom wrestled again and defeated Rusev at the first major event in Saudi Arabia. 3 months later, he stepped into the ring again, this time in a tag team match at the legendary venue in New York, Madison Square Garden. This match meant a lot to him, because he was quite sure it would be his last night at MSG. At a big special show in Australia, The Undertaker faced Triple H. Triple H managed to win a singles match against The Undertaker for the first time. In Saudi Arabia followed the legendary tag team match against Triple H and Shawn Michaels. It was a hot day in Riyadh, and these 4 legends were truly big names on the match card.
I want them thinking, this guy's got a lot left in the tank. If I can leave with that, I'll be content. I can walk away.
However, what happened was exactly what they were afraid of. Several things went wrong, and fans criticized that the 4 were past their prime. None of the participants were satisfied with the match. But this only spurred The Undertaker on to redeem his performance. A vicious cycle.
If the closure moments aren't what you want them to be, you double down on yourself if I can't go out like that.
I know he's not going to be happy with his performance, which means he's going to have to redeem himself.
It's chasing the dragon. And that's, that ain't healthy, man. It's a catch-22 and it's addictive and it's hard to break the cycle and get out of it.
In his next match, it became clear that he could not escape this vicious cycle. It would be the worst match of his career, a fight against Goldberg. The audience eagerly awaited the clash of 2 legends. No one expected such a disappointment. Many things went wrong. Numerous accidents nearly cost The Undertaker his life, as he later said.
I was 2 inches away from making my wife a widow. My kid's father was. I feel like I need some redemption for that performance.
Goldberg tried to explain himself after the match in a tweet. "I knocked myself out and thought I could finish. I love my fans, but I let you down. Everyone else that found pleasure watching the match, I hope you're happy." After this debacle, many fans asked the big question, when would The Undertaker really end his career? It seemed like he couldn't stop, and that was exactly the case.
I didn't want to retire. In my mind, in my heart, there's nothing more that I want to do than get in the ring and perform. You know, it was my body that just said, no, you're done, dude.
The idea of retirement was hard for The Undertaker to accept. A career end is painful. On one hand, The Undertaker repeatedly emphasized his desire to end his career on a good note.
I don't want to become a parody of myself.
On the other hand, he couldn't stop chasing the perfect career ending, which had become unattainable. Far from his prime, his fear became a reality, making mistakes, embarrassing himself, and damaging his career.
He's given his life to this business. It's hard to let go. That's the danger. That you don't know when it's time.
The time keeps marching on, they say, and my body started to pay.
It's really tough getting older in this business. It just comes with time. Your body's gonna break down.
My bones ache every night. I've given all I had to give.
There is a reason why wrestlers often find it so hard to retire. Professional wrestlers have a deep passion and love for what they do. They love the fans, the applause, the adrenaline. Many are addicted to it. With every show and every appearance, there comes a high. Stopping is almost impossible. But his body forced him to quit.
As we get older, even though our brain says go, our body says no. But a red light hits, all of a sudden you can't help it.
WrestleMania 36 was supposed to be The Undertaker's final match. Then came COVID-19. WrestleMania without an audience was disappointing for many. However, it played into The Undertaker's hands. His retirement had become too emotionally charged for him.
All that kayfabing I did and protecting the character would have been destroyed in one promo. I would have been bawling.
The WWE was forced to walk new paths during the pandemic. Thus, the creative team developed the idea of a cinematic fight. The Boneyard match was a spectacular depiction of a brawl, like an action film, shot in a dark cemetery. AJ Styles and The Undertaker executed wrestling storytelling in a brilliant way. Triple H was also involved in the creative process. Despite the unconventional production conditions, The Undertaker injured himself again, this time in a spot with a glass pane. Unlike in the ring, filming could be paused and he could be treated. In the end, the final product was no longer in the hands of the wrestlers, but went to WWE's editing team after the shooting days. They pieced the puzzle together excellently. The fans were treated to a very different but truly exciting and entertaining match. The Boneyard experiment was a complete success.
And then when I saw the final product, I mean, it was like, wow, this turned out really cool. And then the feedback, that was icing on the cake. Everyone had nothing but positive things to say about it. That's very rare.
The performances in this were just phenomenal. Physical, demanding, trash talking was spot on, selling the storytelling, all of it. And I think all that aura and mystique with The Undertaker was back.
WrestleMania 36 marked the end of a long journey, the end of the search for the perfect career ending. Indeed, The Undertaker managed to find his good farewell in an innovative way.
It turned out to be probably the best thing that we could have done.
In this match, Mark Calloway found the farewell to his gimmick. He could finally detach himself from the identity of The Undertaker. The whole process took 6 years, from the end of the streak to his final match.
that had been his identity for so long, and it's something that obviously he still loves so incredibly much until this day. And I knew that was going to be hard for him to leave something that he loves so much behind and that had been a part of him for so long.
At WrestleMania 40, The Undertaker made an epic comeback and helped Cody to victory. However, he is making a conscious effort to stay away from wrestling shows. It is still hard for him not to step into the ring. Even though he is happy with his career ending, he remains a wrestler at heart.
Would you still want to do a match right now if you're...
Absolutely. I would love to be able to. I mean, in my mind and in my heart, there's nothing I'd rather do. But physically, I can't deliver what I think people need or what people would expect from me.
Many wrestlers avoid the world of wrestling entirely after retirement because it is so painful to see others doing what they themselves loved to do. For the first time, a feeling of insignificance creeps in. But for the addiction to the spotlight, there is no rehab clinic.
It's tough for me. I'm still coming to grips with not being in the ring too. It's tough for me, when I even the other night, I have to say, man, I was in the ring, I'm like, man, I'm feeling pretty good, knowing that, like, no, it's not gonna,
It'll never happen?
I don't think so.
When Mark Calaway is backstage at WWE today, he feels uncomfortable. He wants to get into the ring, cut promos, and tell stories, but he struggles to sit on the sidelines. That's why he also declined a creative role at WWE. Vince McMahon originally planned to bring The Undertaker into a leadership role for Raw and SmackDown.
I've been approached about doing it, trying to take what I did in my era and applying it to where the product is now.
There are also voices backstage saying that Taker should take charge of the creative team. He has great ideas and a fantastic sense of characters and storytelling. In his podcast 6 Feet Under, The Undertaker criticized parts of the current WWE program. He wished for more storytelling and fewer risky flips and jumps. He jokingly compared it to Cirque du Soleil. Overall, Calaway is content not taking on a creative role. He is enthusiastic about the way Triple H and Shawn Michaels are thriving in their leadership roles at Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. And The Undertaker sees Triple H as a better booker in the current era than his longtime friend Vince McMahon.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit, more in tune right now with, our audience.
Currently, Calaway avoids speaking publicly about Vince McMahon due to the allegations against him. However, they remain friends. They worked closely together for many years. Without Vince McMahon, there would be no Undertaker. On the flip side, The Undertaker was just as instrumental in the WWE becoming what it is today. Mark Calaway's life's work is unique. As The Undertaker, he fascinated generations of wrestling fans. Everyone respected him, and his wrestling colleagues valued his level-headed leadership.
He's a legit godfather of this business, a leader. I don't think there'll ever be anybody like him. The character, the performances, his legacy is that there'll never be another. He'll be remembered forever.
Wrestling was everything to him. He gave his life to this business and sacrificed a great deal in the process, all for the entertainment of the fans.
Hope they realize what it meant for me to go out night after night and perform in front of them. How much their love and their energy so many nights is what got me through.
The Undertaker goes down in history as the most fascinating wrestler. Looking back on this memorable career, there is only one thing left to say. Thank you, Undertaker, wrestling legend.
Can't think of a better way to spend the last 30 plus years of my life than performing for the people that have followed me all these years.
He is the greatest character in the history of this company. The longevity, whether it be in the streak or be in that character, no one could do that. He's a never-ending, ass-kicking, undead phenomenon. He's a magical person. He's a magical performer.
I mean, an absolutely amazing career, and you should be extremely proud. Mark, I'm proud of you. So proud.
But body don't bounce back like he used to. I consider myself blessed to be able to do something for as long as I've been able to do it. This business has given me everything. It's ingrained in me. It's always going to be a part of me.
I'll still keep the Lord stop.
I did things my way. I'm going to leave my way. And I'm good with that.
This is why I don't know you back.
I can do more good outside the ring now than I can inside. And I'm finally at a place where I'm able to accept that.